This is Inbox Intel, the Real Talk podcast for email pros, brought to you by Notebook LLM and the team behind Email Expert. Straight from the email trenches, Inbox Intel is your no-fluff, no-hype roundup of what's really going on in the world of email marketing, deliverability, and infrastructure. Each episode breaks down the latest news, tech shifts, community buzz, and event updates with sharp insights and honest takes you won't hear anywhere else. No waffle, just the truth. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Inbox Intel from Email Expert. And a very special welcome because this is our first deep dive edition.
Exciting stuff.
It really is. You sent over a fascinating piece. It's a look back, actually, at a case study. Steve Shaw, the CTO of Dotdigital, presented it back in 2020.
Right, so about 5 years ago now. Feels like longer sometimes in this industry.
Doesn't it just? And he was talking about a period maybe 5 years before that, so around 2014, 2015, a time of real transformation for them.
Yeah, pivotal time.
So our mission today is basically to unpack that story. We want to pull out the key insights and really highlight the role Andrew Bonar and Email Expert played.
Absolutely. They were brought in to help tackle some pretty big email challenges Dotdigital was facing as they grew.
Exactly. Think of it like a behind-the-scenes look, how they navigate that growth, the tricky email landscape, and crucially, what you can learn from their experience.
Especially around getting that expert help when you need it.
Right. And it's worth remembering, Dotdigital's global growth has just continued since then, and Steve Shaw is still the CTO today. So the foundations they built back then were clearly solid.
Definitely holds up.
So in this presentation from 5 years back, Steve kicks off, introduces himself, CTO of Dotdigital, but they were known as Mailer before that, remember?
Oh, yeah, I remember the Mailer days.
And he calls it an Email Expert case study. Looking back at, like we said, roughly 2014, 2015.
And the scale back then was quite different, wasn't it?
Totally different. Just over 100 people, mostly focused on EMA, primarily the UK, like 95% of the revenue.
Wow, 95% UK.
Yeah. Sending around 350 million emails a month, which sounds like a lot, but wait till you hear the later numbers.
Foreshadowing.
But the ambition, even then, was big. International growth, US, APAC, becoming this omni-channel engagement platform.
Which is where their rebrand came in, right? To Dotdigital.
Exactly. They felt Mailer just wasn't, well, big enough for where they wanted to go. It kind of pigeonholed them.
Makes sense. You need the brand to match the vision. And this case study really digs into that journey and, importantly, the expertise they tapped into.
It does. And what's interesting straight away is this parallel Steve draws.
Between their growth and the marketer's journey.
Yeah, exactly. He talks about Dotdigital going from startup to grown-up and how that mirrors how a marketer's own email activities have to evolve as they scale up.
That's a great analogy because both have to adapt, right? You can't just keep doing the same thing when you're 10 times bigger.
Precisely. And he flags this common pain point from that time customers worried about emails hitting spam, that whole deliverability anxiety.
Oh, yes, the perennial issue, getting into the inbox.
It was a huge driver for them. And, you know, it's often where people start thinking, maybe we need some outside help here.
Definitely an area where expert guidance pays off.
So Steve also touches on the internal challenges. They didn't have huge dedicated resources for deliverability initially.
Right, he mentioned Tom Corbett.
Yeah, Tom Corbett, who many people know now, kind of grew into that expert role from support initially.
That happens a lot. Someone shows an aptitude, and they step up.
It does. But Steve shares this brilliant, telling question from their exec team back then.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
Basically, can't we just buy more IP addresses? That'll fix it, right?
The classic silver bullet thinking. If only it were that simple.
Right. And Steve points out that's kind of like how some marketers think when they're new to the complexities of email. It led them to realize they had these unknown unknowns.
They didn't even know were problems yet.
Exactly.
Well,
Simply throwing more IPs at it wasn't the answer. It often takes someone from the outside to spot those deeper issues.
And that executive question, it really highlights the need for a proper process, doesn't it? Not just quick fixes.
It does. And Steve outlines their approach, which sounds really methodical, like a good framework.
What was the process?
Well, first, a situation analysis. What are we actually doing right now? An honest look.
Okay, groundwork.
Then, strategy. What do we want to achieve? Get clear on the goals.
Makes sense.
Then you get into recommendations considering cost, short-term wins, long-term fixes,
Practicalities.
and finally, execution. But always thinking about the three pillars: technology, process, and people.
That's key. You need all three aligned.
Absolutely. And recognizing those unknown unknowns was the trigger, really. They decided, okay, we need an expert.
And that's where Andrew Bonar, an email expert, came into the picture.
That's right. It shows that moment where a growing company says, okay, we need specialized knowledge here.
Acknowledging you don't have all the answers internally, that's a big step.
It is. And
Yeah.
Steve really makes a point about how they worked with Andrew. It wasn't just, here's a report, thanks.
More collaborative.
Very much so. He
Yeah.
stressed the value wasn't just in the final documents, but the whole process, the journey.
How so?
He talked about the importance of Andrew listening, really understanding their situation, collaborating closely to figure things out, supporting the review across the people, the processes, the tech.
So working with them, not just for them.
Exactly. Steve even said sometimes that journey, the learning you do during the review, is actually more important than the final output.
I can see that because you build internal understanding and capability along the way.
Right. It empowers the team. It really speaks volumes about how Email Expert approached it.
And through that collaboration, they managed to really clarify the challenges, didn't they? Steve broke it down into 3 core areas identified in the review.
Yeah, that was super clear. What were they again?
Okay, so first was delivery, just the basic mechanics of getting the email out, their platform's core job.
And they were okay there, mostly.
Reasonably, yeah. Good infrastructure, DNS stuff sorted. They were even early adopters in the UK for DMRZ for customers, which was pretty forward-thinking then.
There's always a but.
But they didn't have great visibility. They couldn't clearly see how well they were actually performing on delivery. Lots of data, but not enough insight.
Okay, so delivery was number 1. What else?
Second was compliance. This was all about how their clients used the platform. Were they sticking to the terms and conditions?
Because bad client behavior can hurt everyone on the platform.
Precisely. It impacts the client, sure, but it also drags down Dotdigital's overall sender reputation. Hugely important.
Makes sense. And the third area?
Deliverability. Which, interestingly, was the initial spark, the reason they called Email Expert in the first place.
Right, the email's going to spam problem.
Yeah. But they quickly realized, through the review process, that a huge chunk of deliverability wasn't actually under their direct control.
It was down to the customers.
A lot of it, yes. Things like list quality, content sending practices. So education and promoting best practices became a really big focus there.
So delivery, compliance, deliverability,
Yeah.
a clear breakdown.
Right.
How did they tackle them, especially that visibility issue in delivery?
Well, Steve mentions bringing in new tech, specifically an elk stack, which is kind of like Splunk for anyone familiar, basically a powerful tool for log analysis.
So they could actually see what was happening under the hood.
Oh, exactly. Get real visibility. They also tweaked things like their IP management, especially reverse DNS lookups.
Okay, the technical stuff that helps receivers trust the sender.
Right. And improving how they handled feedback loops, getting those spam complaints back from ISPs and managing soft bounces better.
Building dashboards for the leadership team, too, you said.
Yeah, so everyone could see the key metrics. And crucially, based on the work with Andrew, an email expert, they hired a dedicated specialist. A scientist, Steve called her, Tam.
To constantly tune the infrastructure. That shows real commitment.
It really does. It wasn't a one-off fix. It was about ongoing optimization, guided by expert insight.
And connecting this back, they already had some good stuff, didn't they? That watchdog tool.
Yeah, Winston. Their import scanner, it checked the quality of data clients were trying to upload, so they had a foundation of caring about data quality.
But the work with Email Expert pushed it further.
Seems like it. They evolved this into the Automated Reputation Manager, the ARM system. This was more sophisticated.
How so?
It managed their IP pools dynamically based on actual sending quality metrics, opens, clicks, complaints, bounces, that sort of thing.
So segmenting senders based on their behavior.
Essentially, yeah. Protecting the good senders from the potentially problematic ones. A much more data-driven way to manage reputation, likely refined with that expert input they got.
Okay, let's shift to compliance then. What changed there?
Steve talked about fundamental changes to their terms and conditions, making the expectations really clear for customers.
Setting the ground rules properly.
Exactly. And he stressed this needed buy-in from the whole company, not just the compliance team.
Culture change, almost.
Definitely. They also beefed up their processes for monitoring existing customers and, importantly, vetting new ones much more carefully.
The garbage in, garbage out principle he mentioned.
That's the one. And making sure new clients shared their ethical standards for email. You have to protect the platform's integrity.
Absolutely critical for long-term health.
Oh.
So that covers compliance.
Yeah.
What about deliverability and reputation building?
Well, a big part of that was building better relationships with the big mailbox providers. Gmail, Hotmail, the receivers.
Getting on their good side, essentially.
But more like building trust, showing them you're a responsible sender platform. That involved educating their own staff, having those clear compliance processes we just talked about.
And again, relying on experts.
Yes, Andrew's guidance was instrumental here too, it seems. Steve even mentioned their 6 C's of deliverability they use to educate customers.
Oh, yeah. What are the 6 C's?
Consented data, content, cadence, consistency, contact data quality, and change management. A neat framework.
That's quite comprehensive.
And they put it in a blog post showing they wanted to share that knowledge. Plus, Steve highlighted their involvement with M3AAWG.
The industry group.
Yeah, the messaging, malware, and mobile anti-abuse working group. Being part of that community, working to make the internet better, it all adds up to building that trusted reputation.
It sounds like they really built up their internal capability, too. Steve mentioned Team Awesome.
He did. Their customer-facing team focused specifically on delivery, deliverability, and compliance.
A dedicated resource.
And he said the work with Email Expert really helped clarify the different roles within that. Who helps with deliverability advice, the good guys, versus who enforces the rules, the folks telling you off.
Uh-huh. Yeah, clear roles are important. He gave a shout out to James Coons and Tom Corbett, too.
Right. Acknowledging the key people who built that expertise internally, guided by that initial expert engagement.
So let's talk results. This was all around 2015. Looking back from 2020, what was the impact Steve shared?
The numbers were pretty striking, actually. Remember that 350 million emails a month starting point?
Yeah.
By 2020, they were sending 2 billion a month.
Wow. That's incredible growth.
Huge scaling. And delivery times for marketing emails dropped significantly down to under 10 minutes on average.
Faster delivery, much higher volume, and deliverability itself.
Big improvements there, too. Relay rates, getting the emails accepted by the receiving servers, hit 99.2%.
That's impressive.
It really is. And Steve was clear. This wasn't just one thing. It was the combination, tuning the delivery tech, enforcing compliance, and that effective deliverability consulting and education, all influenced heavily by the insights from Andrew and Email Expert.
It really shows the power of that holistic approach, guided by expertise.
Absolutely. A lasting impact.
And Steve wrapped up by connecting it all back to the marketer listening. Back to you.
How so?
He pointed out that even if your marketing strategies seem fine, performance can dip. And it's really hard to judge your own work objectively sometimes.
The can't see the forest for the trees problem.
Exactly. As your business grows, your tactics have to evolve. He really hammered home the value of getting that outside-in view.
Listening to experts, collaborating.
Yes, working together to drive change. And he left with a thought-provoker, too.
What was that?
The gap between what's legally okay in email and what's actually best practice. Something for everyone to think about.
That's a crucial distinction. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right, so wrapping this all up, what does this deep dive tell us? What's the key takeaway for you listening?
For me, it hammers home the need for a holistic view of email. It's not just delivery tech.
It's the compliance, it's educating users on best practices. It all ties together.
Absolutely. And the Dotdigital story, especially their work with Andrew Bonar, an email expert, is such a strong case study for the value of bringing in that external expertise.
When you're facing those complex growth challenges, the guidance can be invaluable.
Definitely. Which maybe leads to a question for you, the listener.
Go on.
Where in your email strategy could an outside perspective help? Are there maybe some unknown unknowns hiding in your deliverability or engagement data?
Good question. Maybe revisiting those 6 C's they used could be a useful starting point for your own internal review.
Consented data, content, cadence, consistency, contact data quality, change management. Yeah, definitely worth reviewing against your own practices.
It's been a really fascinating look back, hasn't it? A pivotal moment for Dotdigital, and just a great example of strategic thinking and expert collaboration paying off.
A powerful story.
We really hope this first Inbox Intel deep dive has given you some valuable food for thought. What part of this story stood out most to you, especially thinking about that expert guidance aspect?
Yeah, we'd love to hear your takeaways.
Let us know your thoughts. Any questions that spark, please do join the conversation.